What's up, crypto junkies? It's Jay, and welcome to this video. We're going to chat about Bitcoin. I was working on some high interval charts here, and I noticed some of the personality, some of the deeper personality of Bitcoin. Yes, every coin has its own personality, and so let's talk about some of the things I found with Bitcoin. Let's dive in. Going to look at RSI specifically, okay? So if you don't want to see this, if you don't care about some deeper trends going on with Bitcoin, then just tune out and check out the next one, okay? So two things I want to point out is that from 2017, that's what I got pulled up. I got RSI pulled up, and I got a 200 moving average. That's 200 days because we're on a 1 day. Remember, higher time frames usually give you a better outlook, usually more definitive of an answer, whereas shorter time frames are like a maybe sort of. You know, again, higher time frames are going to give you definites, okay? So since the start of 2017 and before that, we have been cruising well above the 200 moving average up until this big correction here when everyone thought that the world was going to come to an end. That also correlates to the only third time in the history of the last 12 months that the RSI got into what would be considered an extreme oversold position. Now, this line is a little thin, but it should be at the 30, okay? There's normally a dotted line there. RSI gives you that naturally. A dotted at the 30 and 70, which is really our sweet spot, 50 being the middle. 70, over 70 starts to signify overbought. Below 30 starts to signify oversold and extreme overselling, actually. Whereas 70 isn't necessarily overbought. It's 80, I think, would be a extreme overbought situation. That's how most people look at it anyways. That's not the original rules. But in crypto, you got to kind of fluctuate a little bit between the standard deviation of other markets in this one, okay? So this marks just the third time in the last 12 months, beyond 12 months, that we have seen it dip below 30 on the RSI. Now, that is significant when you look at, okay, well, how many times is it over 70? We have way more times, okay? And we need to count crossing this line as one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that's all 1, 11, 12, 13, 14 times it crossed into overbought territory, and 3 times it crossed over into oversold territory. So I looked up these dates, and there wasn't really that much going on around this time. We had just finished the fork on August 1st or 2nd. There was some North Korea FUD, I think, happening at this time. September, I really found nothing. Maybe there's some geopolitical events going on that I wasn't sure of, but this was definitely from a series of events, really. But after the new year, a lot of people, they were looking for Bitcoin to keep going up. At this point, there was such a, if you look at the distance between a 200 moving average and where the candle action was, there's just such a, I think, blind illusion from a lot of investors and speculators in the market thinking that we were just going to keep going up. There's this whole parabolic curve created just for little old Bitcoin, and then it started to really break down and massively correct. And as it corrected longer and longer, it really wasn't even that much time anyways. It was like 30 days in comparison to the bull run that we saw up. But the sentiment started getting worse and worse, and there was a ton of people who exited the market. They got absolutely wrecked. There was a ton of people who got liquidated on their positions and owed a lot of money. There's a lot of people who exited Bitcoin. There's actually a rolling thread on Reddit, which is now comprised of thousands of people who exited Bitcoin and said, fuck Bitcoin, when this happened, which to me is just utterly ridiculous. Because if we look at now in hindsight, oh, hey, Jay, wasn't that just another great buying time? Yeah, it was. So this time, that's in black, let's make it white. This point here was once again another great dip. And, you know, we're shouting this and echoing this through our private community in a Discord, that these are the times that you buy in when it starts to break down like that and accumulate, okay? And so now we are starting to slingshot our way back through support zones. We're facing another one that we're about to enter into. And if we can close above that in a 1 day scenario, then we are going to most likely stay above that 11,000 range. But we're starting to break above the 200 exponential moving average again, which is a great sign. And there's a ton of other smaller indicators that we could, oh, what did I just delete? There's a bunch of other smaller indicators that we could look at to give us some foresight there, but I'm deleting the wrong thing now. There we go. Wow. And so, yeah, this really is significant because I don't think I've ever really noticed that. And so what it's saying is essentially that Bitcoin, every coin has its own personality. It's got its own little mapping, right? And you got to sort that out, which is why most people, they tend to trade the same coins, because a coin has a personality that once you start to figure it out, then you'll recognize more things within the patterns, okay? But the other thing I want to point out is that predominantly Bitcoin likes to be what we'd consider parabolic. It likes to be well above the 200 moving average. It likes to be growing at a very fast pace. At least that's what it's been doing up till this point. So let's take a look at another number here, which is the 50. The 50 is that median, that dead nuts middle number for the RSI. And you notice over the last 12 months especially, we've spent most of our time, are we into, there we go. We've spent most of our time now floating above that 200. Excuse me, floating above that 50. We've spent way more time above the 50 than below the 50. So below the 50, we just got these key marking points here through here, okay? Above, we've got this section, this big section, this one, and this one. And you see the action here is much greater above the 50 than it is below the 50. And so again, personality-wise, it just says that this coin is predominantly liking the growth versus the pullback, and the bull momentum versus the bear momentum, as much as people think that this is like a super heavy manipulated coin. You know, I stated once that I didn't think Bitcoin was heavily manipulated, and I think that might have been a wrong way to say it. What the simplest way to break that down would be the manipulation in crypto is different than what you're used to in commodities and what you're used to in Forex and what you're used to in other markets. Those have been around longer, the manipulations, and I think those are a little bit easier to spot because they have patterns to them. This is still relatively new, so most people do not know the patterns yet, and therefore they tend to make dramatic assumptions about it, thinking that this is somehow very, very different, or it's too manipulated, or this or that. Whereas I tend to think along the lines that it's not necessarily, we just don't have enough time under our belts to measure this. And there's different variables at play. There's different groups of whales that are all conspiring together and against each other that hold the most amount of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin affects the altcoin market still strongly. So those are all still realities that we have to look at, and we have to look at the fact that when major news hits, that does break TA strategies, which there's also a ton of bad news hitting through this section, which is what's led off to a lot of this. So Bitcoin really was hit by so many different fronts during this time frame that it's no wonder we didn't go down lower, actually, which led to market sentiment being pretty low. And now, you know, you look at it and everybody, I think the $10,000 line is very psychological for people, and people are getting excited again. You know, people are starting to look at Bitcoin again, whereas I think before they were kind of hiding and ignoring their portfolios. Now they're willing to look at it again. So food for thought. I was looking through this this morning, and I noticed this, and I wanted to share it with you. So if you like what we're doing here on the channel, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any of the future action, and smash the like button, because who just clicks a like button nowadays? And be on the lookout for more videos hitting the channel very soon.